Good morning. Last time I was here, I didn't expect to be back. But we haven't moved yet, and a bunch of the pastors went to Israel, which created openings, and here I am. I didn't go to Israel this time. I've been there before. By the way, that's a really fun thing to do. I used to always say, you don't need to go to Israel to be a good pastor. And I still believe that. But it's cool if you do. You get things that you don't get otherwise. It doesn't change what the scripture says. What it gives you is a picture of the spot where it happened. And sometimes that's very cool. Dothan, little town in northern Israel. It comes up 2 times in scripture. Dothan is where Joseph caught up with his brothers, and they threw him in the pit and sold him as a slave. The other time it comes up, Elisha is living in Dothan. And he's telling the king of Israel everything that the enemy king has in his plans so they can never catch the king of Israel. Somebody is telling him their plans ahead. The enemy king thinks it's a spy within his inner circle. Doesn't matter how tight he keeps the information, somebody still tells. And they say, no, it's not us. They get a prophet. He tells the king of Israel what you say in your bedroom. Well, where do we find this guy, says the king. Well, Dothan, they said. So they sent the army at night and surrounded the little town of Dothan. In the morning, the servant wakes up and sees that they're surrounded. And he says, oh, master, we're done for, my translation. We are in deep trouble. And Elisha prays that God will open his eyes, and his eyes are opened. And he sees that the hills around are filled with chariots of fire. Now, when you go there and you see Dothan, it's a typical little tell, flat-topped hill, remains of an old city, and a little bit of a valley around it, and then a nice big horseshoe of not huge mountains, but pretty good hills around the city of Dothan. And when I saw it, immediately I saw that those hills around are a whole lot more than the little bitty valley in the bottom. The enemy that had the city surrounded was nothing compared to all the hills filled with horses and chariots of fire. Guess who was surrounded? That army down there was surrounded with this army out here, which was much bigger and much more impressive. It's like the big stadium and the small playing field. Yeah, it's that kind of a comparison, which is kind of cool. Once you get the image in your head, you can't make it go away. Your pastors are coming back with images in their heads they'll share with you. I hope you have as much fun listening to them as I had going to Israel. It was great. It was great. When my wife and I were relatively newly married, so this was a bunch of years ago, we were volunteers in Borneo, and while we were over there, sick dogs and stray dogs were pretty common. It was a third world country, and dogs just kind of happened. A stray showed up at the school where we were working and staying, one that was in especially bad condition, and the Lord used that dog to teach me some very powerful, simple but powerful life lessons. When I say dogs just happen, let me give you an illustration of that. Most of the dogs just ate whatever food was left from the family's meals. The chickens ate some of it too, so there was scrapping for whatever there was available. You take what you like, and we'll take what we like, and the stuff we both like we have to argue about. And that kind of culture toward dogs is common outside the United States. It's pretty uncommon. I don't know now, it maybe changed a bit, but the rest of the world did not spend money on dogs. It's almost in their culture unconscionable to do that because the money could save a person's life. And when people's lives are on the line all around you, dogs don't rise that high. And so dogs just kind of happen and kind of take care of themselves. One of the families at our secondary school where we were had a very nice dog. When they moved to a different school, they just left the dog. They didn't take the dog with them. They didn't arrange to give the dog to anyone. They just left, and there was this dog. And after a few days, one of the other teachers said, well, we don't have a dog. I guess we'll take the dog. So they took the dog. But dogs just happened. When the stray came around, she was very nearly dead. Hadn't eaten well in a long, long time. It is. This is a emaciated, malnourished dog. I don't have any pictures from when the dog first showed up over in Borneo. I should have, looking back at it. Although there was nothing that would suggest to you, you ought to take a picture of this dog. It was an ugly dog. So I went on and looked on the internet. And the dog you see here is definitely malnourished. The arched back and the feet pulled together is what happens when you don't eat enough long enough. Only the dog that showed up there, the feet were closer together. I couldn't find one as bad as we had on the internet. Nobody's got a picture of a dog that malnourished. So I got the closest I could get. If you take those feet and you pull them together so they don't get more than about 8 or 9 inches apart, that's what this dog looked like. Now, when your feet are that close together, you can hardly even move. And you don't have any good balance at all. And the other dogs figured that out right away. You bump them, they fall over. But because they can't move, they can't break their fall, and they just plop hard. And it hurts. You howl. And the other dogs go, let's do that again. That was funny. That's fun. Let's do that again. So they gained their entertainment by knocking this dog around and knocking it over. She would howl pitifully every time, but there was nothing she could do about it. We watched the dog, expecting it fully to die in a day or two, but she didn't. After a few days, by my personality, I can't take that anymore, right? I gotta do something to try to rescue this dog, if at all possible. We had a discussion, Carol and I, and concluded we probably shouldn't be wasting actual good food on a dog that was going to die anyway. But we did have some burned peanuts. The backstory to the burned peanuts is over in Borneo, you couldn't buy peanut butter, at least not at any kind of reasonable price. So we made our own peanut butter, which involved buy the peanuts, roast the peanuts, take the peanuts down to Temporarily where the other school was, and the mission president had a peanut grinder, which would make peanut butter. So once you've roasted your peanuts, you take them down there, run them through the peanut butter maker, and you've got peanut butter. But because we were roasting our own peanuts, it turns out that no, it's not done yet, and whoops, it's overdone. It's not very far apart when you're roasting peanuts in the oven. So we had some, whoops, they're overdone peanuts. Now, when we overdid the peanuts, not every peanut on the pan is the same color, right? So we ate the best ones. We probably used some for peanut butter, and then we were getting, so it's not peanut butter. We ate a few of those. And we were down to the stuff that wasn't worth trying to eat anymore, which means it was about chocolate brown on down to black. So we decided that it would be okay to give some of these burned peanuts to a dog. I don't know if dogs like peanuts. I've never figured that out. But I took some burned peanuts out to see if I could give them to this dog. And I said, here, doggy, doggy, here, doggy, doggy. We don't have a name for this dog yet. No, here, doggy, doggy. I got some food for you. And the dog looked at me and hobbled away as fast as she could.
What else would you do if you've never had anything but bad experiences from anybody or anything in your life? You stay out of reach. How are you going to feed a dog that stays out of reach? Well, eventually, when the dog was out in the garden area, along a path between the bananas and the pineapples, I set some peanuts down while the dog was watching me by the side of the trail. I said, "Here, doggy dog, there's some food here for you." And then I backed up. And eventually the dog came over and gobbled up the peanuts. So, well, there's more where those came from. So we started feeding the dog burned peanuts. A couple of days later, I was working in the garden down at the other end of the housing row from where we lived. I don't remember exactly, but my memory is I was probably working by the squash plant. Just a little practical advice. Seeds from the United States don't always do well in gardens in the tropics. Lots of the plants we grow around here don't do well in a tropical climate. Now, around here in the United States, Hubbard squash, when you get a squash mature, nothing touches them. I have a friend who 2 years later had a perfectly edible Hubbard squash. I've had them a whole year later. When the next harvest came on, they're perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. They're tough. The plants are good. They grow big. They grow healthy. We planted these squash seeds in Borneo, and the third day they were high enough to have leaves about that big. 3 days. Trouble was, in the tropics, the fruit would always rot when they were little. Try to get it up on a trellis off the ground, so they always rotted. We never got a squash off that plant. Now, I think it was in the days when I was starting to grow it up on a trellis to see if that would work. And I'm working down in the garden, squatting down, and I feel a bump on my elbow. And I turn around, and there's this stray dog, bumping me with her nose. "I'm with you," she says, basically. And I had a dog. I had a dog whether I wanted a dog or not. I now had a dog. Well, this dog wasn't just hungry. This dog also had mange. I looked on the internet for pictures of dogs with mange, and again, I couldn't find one quite up to what our dog had. Our dog had no hair. No hair. That means your skin is gray and wrinkled, and you look like some kind of a miniature, dried-up version of an elephant for coloration. Pretty ugly, actually. Hunkered over because of malnourishment. No hair because of mange. It was truly an ugly dog. An ugly dog. About the ugliest dog I've seen. Certainly the worst for malnourishment and the worst for mange. But I had a dog. I started to eat. And I did a quick assessment of what the dog needs. And I realized everything this dog needs, I can figure out how to do. I can do it. Dog can't do it. Dog can't do any of it. But I can, and I'm willing to do it. And I can do what this dog needs to be well. Now, pretty soon, the burned peanuts run out. There's only so many of them. And you have to find other things to feed the dog. John 6, verse 35, Jesus says, "I'm the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst." The dog needed food that she couldn't get for herself. We need spiritual food that we can't provide for ourselves. But I knew I could get that dog food, and the dog would be all right. We can receive from Jesus the food that we need, and we can be all right. I named the dog Poochkin, the little Pooch. She was kind of a small dog. It turns out that Poochkin might be a stray dog, nearly dead, but after you feed the dog a little, and she's not about to starve in 1 or 2 days, I don't think you could make her eat a peanut again, burned or not. and so we had to upgrade the food a bit. Now, there's limits. You can't just go out and buy dog food. It wasn't even for sale. But we had to figure out how to get real food for the dog, good food, not too expensive. We were on a stipend that wasn't a whole lot of money around, so we had to be a little careful. Our dog always had good food, nourishing food, but she didn't always like what we gave her. She had higher level tastes than that. And the Fisher family, who lived down by where the gardens were at the other end of the housing row, also had a dog, Lady. Lady also didn't particularly like her food, but my dog thought that her food was a lot better. So my dog would go down to eat Lady's food, which Lady didn't appreciate. So Lady would bury her food with the driveway gravel, which was 3/4 inch cracked rock, which has got sharp edges on it. She would use her nose to push the rocks up over the dog food dish until it was completely buried in these rocks. But in the process, the sharp rocks would cut her nose all up. But she didn't like my dog eating her food enough that she would do that. Now, that urge to bury your food by pushing with your nose, it must be a pretty instinctual thing for dogs. Because years later, we had 2 dogs living in Iowa, and we had a dog dish that sat out on the grass right behind our back door where we would feed the dogs. And one day I saw one of the dogs doing this by the dog dish, trying to push with her nose. There's no rocks. There's nothing loose there. It's grass. Still, I wouldn't have known what the dog was doing if I hadn't watched it in Borneo with rocks that would move. The dog was trying to bury the food so the other dog couldn't get it. It's a deep instinct to keep the other dog from getting your food. Eventually, as the dog continued to eat decent food, either her own or Lady's, the dog started to stretch back out into a more normal shape and began to be able to move about until ultimately she could move around normally. Now, I told you that the other dogs would knock her over, and right away, when I decided this is my dog and the dog decided I'm with you, I made the other dogs quit doing that. Now, she couldn't make the other dogs quit doing that, but I could. I'm bigger than they are. Besides, I'm a person, and they have to pay attention to what you say, at least a little bit, even if they're not your dog. They come around and say, "Hey, stop that." You know, you can make them go away. You can protect your dog. Yes, my dog needed protection, and I was pleased to give it to her. And we also need protection that we can't give to ourselves. 1 Peter 5, verse 8, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." And if it's just us and the devil, we are in trouble. We're in trouble. We can't make him quit. We can't make him leave us alone. It takes the Lord saying, "Hey, back off. Leave them alone. They're mine. Cut it out. Come on." That kind of thing. If the Lord tells him to move off, he's got to do it. If we tell him to move off, he doesn't have to do it. Unless it's done in the Lord's name, and the Lord's power is doing it, that he has to respect. So this dog started following me everywhere, all the time. Didn't get to come into the house. Apart from that, every time I stepped out the door, there was the dog, and would follow me wherever I went. It reminded me of Revelation 14, verse 4, our scripture reading this morning. "These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes." Follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Why? Why did the dog follow me everywhere? because the dog knew I'm dead if I don't. Pretty simple. And it's true. I'm dead if I don't. That's not a bad reason for us to follow Jesus, is it? We're dead if we don't. He's our life. He has what we need. He is our protector, our provider, our Savior. If we're with Him, and that was, you could see it, the way my dog acted, that she's thinking, I'm with Him. I'm with Him. I'm dead if I don't. She'd follow me to the office where I was taking care of the accounts for the school. That itself was kind of interesting because someone would come in, make a payment for one of the students on their tuition. It wasn't very much, but it was actual money. I would take down the name of the student, and I'd go into my record book to look for that, and I couldn't find that name anywhere. Like, people don't pay for a student that's not here. That just doesn't happen. So I would ask the principal, so who's this? And he said, oh, that's so-and-so. Everybody had multiple names. It was just, everybody had multiple names. You had multiple names for several reasons. One was you had your family name, where the family name passes down from generation to generation. Van Arsdale, my family name. We can chase it back a ways. We lose track of it back somewhere around New York. We don't know exactly where the origin of it is. But that name has been coming for a number of generations. But often in other cultures in the past, and some European cultures too, the name would be son of. And I think MacDonald means son of Donald, doesn't it? I think so. And some of the names, Edward's son would be the son of Edward. And that would be the form of name that would be official in Borneo because it's officially a Muslim country. Now, the part we were in was not Muslim people, but the country is officially Muslim. And so your official name in government records had to be in the son of form. So my father, being William, I would be James Williams' son. And my son, Jonathan, would be Jonathan Jameson. James' son. William's son. And so your family name or last name would be son of your father. And so everyone had those names. The son of name, but they also had the traditional family name like we have in their own culture, and then they had nicknames. 3 or 4 names was not uncommon. Any old name could show up in the office, and while I was taking care of business for the school, my dog was under my desk, right by my feet. When I got up to go, she got up to go. When I went home, she went home. One day, I went out the door to our house. The dog had been around for a while. She'd gotten comfortable enough to wander just a little from the front door, around the corner, to see what was happening on the other side of the building. She'd wandered around the corner, and I went the other way when I went out. And she dashed back to the door because she heard me go out, and she looked all around, and she couldn't see me. And she said, "Oh, I'm dead." It really sounded like a dog who said, "I'm dead." She lost track of me. I'm with you. If I'm not with you, I'm dead. But she was still an ugly dog. Even when she started to stretch out and started to move a little, still had mange. Now, I had hopes that you could cure mange. I'd had a cat when I was in academy. That was in Singapore, Far Eastern Academy. I still don't remember how I got away with having a cat in a dormitory. I'm not sure it was officially approved, but it was certainly known and tolerated. Somebody had to authorize me to leave campus to take the cat to the veterinarian to fix the spot of mange on the cat. The veterinarian, taking account of my poor financial condition, made some homemade mange cure. Sulfur mixed with Vaseline. It worked. Bingo. The mange was gone on the cat. So I'm thinking, man, sulfur, right? Just got it. But before we got there, I looked in the shop building, and we had gardening stuff in there, and there was a bottle of malathion. Anybody know what malathion is? It's bug spray, insecticide, used by home gardeners. I got some at home. My wife uses it on the scale insects on her houseplants. But the label on this bottle of malathion was not the home use label. This was the farmer's use label. And it said what to do to bathe your pigs with malathion to cure mange. I said, oh, pig, dog, close enough, close enough. I'll use the mix they use for pigs. I'll bathe the dog. And it worked. It worked. After a few days, fuzz starts coming out on the dog. And by, hair came out on the dog. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 5. Why should you be stricken again? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick. The whole heart is faint. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there's no soundness in it. From head to toe, you're sick. That was this dog. Mange. From head to toe, the whole dog had mange. But with a little malathion and a label that told you how to do it, we gave the dog a malathion bath. That's the dog afterward. Tan with black and white accents. Actually kind of a cute dog in the end. And somewhere around the time this picture was taken, this is actually my dog, Poochkin. About the time the picture was taken, one of the elders at church said, well, your dog is almost all better now. Yeah, that's right. Almost all better now. Over in Borneo, church buildings were built with slightly different needs in mind. There wasn't any glass in the windows because it never got cold. And to keep the rain out, you just put an extra long overhang on the roof and you're fine. The walls didn't come quite to the ground because then they would touch the ground and get wet and rot. The posts were rot resistant, but the rest of the wall was less rot resistant, so you leave about 3-4 inches gap between the concrete pad and the wall of the church. And the upper half of the wall was open except for mesh. Not screen, construction mesh for, like in a concrete pad, 4-inch hole kind of wire mesh. Birds fly through, almost anything. If it can go through a 4-inch hole, it'll go through the middle of church service. The doors were open, and the dogs followed their owners to church and tucked under the bench. The only problem was, if I'm sitting by you and my dog's under me and your dog's under you and the dogs don't like each other, down under the pew in the middle of church, you get a going on down there, and the owner said, hey, knock it off. I wasn't into that. So the rule for my dog was, you don't go into church. You don't go into church. So my dog would wait for me outside by the door. She learned it. She would wait right there till after church. Except there was the day that I was preaching. And their platform had a bit of a barrier that went all the way across in front, up to about platform level, a little higher platform. But in the corner, it wasn't actually platform. It was down to the concrete level down there in both corners. You couldn't see that from the audience, but there's a space that drops off down to floor level there. And I was up at the pulpit preaching, and I looked over in the corner over there, and there was my dog. Inside, down in that corner, smiling up at me like, I'm with you, and you can't say no. Some of you remember the days of the landline telephone when kids knew exactly how long that cord was. Right? The dog knew that I was tethered to the pulpit and couldn't do a thing about it. So the not in church rule was, it had a little asterisk by it, subject to enforceability, I suppose, something like that. When I was being followed by the dog in the early stages, the ugly stages, the ugly dog, Carol would sometimes say to me, "Aren't you embarrassed to have an ugly dog like that following you around?" I mean, it was the ugliest dog in the whole community. There was, hands down, ugliest dog in the whole community. Aren't you embarrassed to be followed by an ugly dog? Actually, I wasn't, because I knew what that good dog could be. We're headed toward a fine dog. We're just in a transitional stage here. You think Jesus would have reason to be embarrassed when we follow him around? Yeah, in the scale of the universe, we're not that great. But I don't think he's embarrassed. I really don't. Because I think he knows what he can do with us. And he's in the midst of doing it with us. And if we don't bail out, he will succeed in fixing us. So that the rest of the universe will be able to say, "Hey, they're about all better now, aren't they?" And he can say, "Yeah, they are, aren't they? They are." Well, the dog stayed by the front door, but it rains in Borneo. So to protect the dog from the splash back under the eave, I found a cardboard box, put it out by the door. That became the dog's house. Now this was a stray dog who had been that close to death. But she knew better dog food when she saw it. And she didn't like walking through mud puddles. Now Borneo is tropical, it rains a lot, and mud puddles are a fact of life. They are a normal part of life in Borneo. We always wore zoris, rubber flip-flops, because they don't rot. And you can just rinse them off when they get muddy. And you learn an interesting shuffle. You don't walk the same when you're wearing flip-flops in muddy territory. Anybody here know the difference? Been there, done that? If you walk normally, at the end of each step, your toes make the zori flip up in the back. And that's like riding a bicycle without a fender through a mud puddle. You stripe yourself with mud, if it's a bicycle. With zoris, it's 2 stripes up the back, 1 for each foot. Right up, all the way to the shoulder, you'll stripe yourself with mud. So you learn to kind of shuffle and drag your heels when you're walking. As I'm dragging my heels so I don't spray myself with mud, the dog is picking her way around the mud puddles. No, she won't walk through the mud puddles. This is a dog who knows the better things of life and appreciates them when they're available. And the dog would sit in the doghouse box and look at the doormat right outside our front door. It was a rag rug. It didn't take her but a day or two to figure out, that's softer than this. She took my doormat into her doghouse and never gave it back. Water buffalo also kind of happened in Borneo. I mean, each one belonged to a particular person, but they would just turn them loose in the jungle down by the river. Most of the time, they'd fend for themselves down there. Until it was time to do a little work in a field. You go down, you find your water buffalo, you catch it, bring it back up, it works for you, and then you turn it loose again. Water buffalo are not especially intellectual creatures. And to keep them out of your school property or gardens, one piece of barbed wire, even if it's kind of rusty and just twisted together poorly, is good enough. It doesn't take much to keep them out. Unless one night you forget to close the barbed wire or the gate, and the water buffalo go in. Now they know you got that garden in there, and they know they can get to the garden in there, and they like to go into your garden. The next day they come by and the wire's up, and they say, "Hey, there's a wire here. Yeah, see that? But we got in. Yeah, I think we can do it. Hey, let's push." You know what happens when a bunch of water buffalo push? You can't build a fence good enough to keep them out. So now you don't just close the wire, you close the gate. They blow the gate down. We actually had to import a stun cattle prod from the United States to get the water buffalo under control. Because we left the gate open once, and they learned that they could get in, and after that, it's, "Come on, boys, let's push." And in they come. Water buffalo, when they're eating, they try everything, and they spit out what they don't like. But they don't know they don't like it until they get it in their mouth and take a good chomp, which means when they're walking through the pineapple plantation, they grab the plant. The whole plant looks like the top of a pineapple, right? Kind of sharp, rough leaves. They grab that, take a bite, and say, "Eh," and spit it out. But they just pulled up the plant, killed it. And they go right through one. No, this is the same as the one before. You know, they're not up for that. So they destroy things like crazy. They come to a banana plant, and they say, "Oh, kind of big, but I can do this." And they just walk right over the top. They're soft plants. They're not hard woody. And they kill the banana plants. They do lots of destruction. They liked the decorative bushes with multicolored leaves that grew right outside our apartment. They ate those. They did like those. The happiest water buffalo I ever saw was one we saw in a little village when we were driving through. We were about 3 hours out from the big city, and we'd drive back and forth periodically. Driving through this little village, and there was the town garbage pile, the dump. And there was a water buffalo standing over the garbage pile, eating, with a clear smile on its face. It was the happiest water buffalo I have ever seen. Anybody want to guess what it was eating? A brown corrugated cardboard box. It's got to taste to them very close to ice cream does to us. It was one happy water buffalo. Now, remember what I put out for my dog's doghouse? Middle of the night, one night, I hear the water buffalo out there crunching around and busting stuff. And then I hear, "Yip!" No. In the morning I looked, there's no doghouse, and there's no dog. I thought, no, they didn't eat my dog. But when I opened the door, the dog came scooting around from the other side of the house. "Amanda, I'm glad to see you. Have I got a story to tell?" Dog was all right. But I think the dog was in the box when the water buffalo picked it up and started eating it. Doghouse is gone. I can find another box. Put another box out there. The way people say this in English is, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." The way the dog said it was, "I'm not going in one of those again." No. Nearly cost me my life last time. I will not go in a cardboard box again. So I had to rustle around, find some old boards, and build a proper doghouse for my dog. Reminds me of Jesus saying, "I am going to prepare a place for you. If I do, I'll come back and take you there." He's got something that will upgrade us from the cardboard boxes we use here to stay in. You know, all the stuff we have here is actually disposable. Intentionally disposable from heaven's point of view. It's all temporary, intentionally disposable stuff. So in the grand scale of things, it's all cardboard box. It's all cardboard box. But Jesus says, "I got the real thing for you. Don't put too much on this one, because I got the real one for you up there."
Puchkin. Interesting experience. Ugliest dog I've ever seen. And the best dog I've ever had. And I learned some things from Puchkin. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did. She needed food. She needed protection. She needed healing. She needed shelter. She couldn't do any of that for herself, but I could. I could. And when she figured that out, she said, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm dead if I don't. We need those things spiritually. Food, protection, healing, shelter. And Jesus will do all of those for us if we stick with him. Let's pray. Father, I pray that you would help us to follow you always, to receive from you all that we need, so that we can be all that you want us to be, and be with you forever. In Jesus' name, amen.